The rain always makes me remember, Anne. It's strange how sound can pull you back into time, how the soft patter against glass can carry voices long gone. You asked me once if I ever regretted marrying Edward. I didn't answer you then, but perhaps tonight I finally can. We were married in the spring of 1969. The lilacs had just begun to bloom, and I remember thinking that the whole world smelled like hope. He looked handsome that morning, not radiant, not joyful, just composed, like a man fulfilling a promise he never made. I should have seen it, the way his eyes drifted somewhere else when I smiled at him, the way his hand trembled ever so slightly when he held mine during our vows. But I was young, Anne. I mistook silence for depth, distance for mystery. We moved into a small brick house near the river. It had one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and windows that refused to close properly. I thought it was perfect. He thought it was temporary. In those early days, I tried to fill our little home with laughter, candles at dinner, soft music, fresh flowers on the table. But he would often return late, smelling faintly of cigarettes and something sweet, a perfume I didn't wear. Still, I told myself, he's tired, he's busy, he just needs time. Love, I thought, would fix it all. Then, one night, I woke to the sound of him whispering in his sleep. It wasn't my name. It was Clara, a name I'd never heard before. Yet it echoed through that dark room like thunder. The next morning, I made him breakfast, eggs, toast, and silence. He thanked me, kissed my forehead, and left for work, and I sat there for hours, staring at the untouched cup of tea he'd left behind. That was the morning I learned how loneliness can exist, even with two chairs at the same table. Anne stirs her tea quietly as I finish my sentence. She doesn't interrupt. She never does. That's the thing about old friends. They let you bleed without asking where the wound is. I tell her I still remember the smell of that lilac bouquet pressed between the pages of our wedding album. I never threw it away, because no matter how much truth hurts, a part of you still wants to believe the dream you built wasn't a lie. You know, Anne, the hardest part isn't losing love. It's realizing you never truly had it. A few weeks after that morning, the unease inside me grew into something heavier, something that kept me awake at night. Edward had started coming home even later. His excuses changed like the weather. Work ran over. The train was delayed. A friend needed me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to stay the good wife, patient, understanding, blind. Then, one rainy evening, I went to fetch his coat from the hallway cupboard. That's when I found it, a small folded note tucked in the pocket. Next Friday, same place. I miss you. No name, no signature, but the handwriting. It was delicate, familiar somehow. It wasn't mine. I didn't cry then. Instead, I did something quite ordinary. I made dinner. I stirred the soup slowly, the way he liked it, as if nothing had changed. And when he came home, I smiled, kissed his cheek, and asked about his day. He looked tired, or maybe guilty. I couldn't tell any more. That night, after he'd fallen asleep beside me, I got out of bed, walked to his study, and opened the drawer where he kept his letters. Inside were photographs, old ones, black and white. Edward, with a woman I'd never seen before. She had soft eyes, a graceful smile, and on the back of one photo was written a single word, Clara. There it was, the name that had haunted my dreams. I held that photograph for what felt like hours. My hands trembled, but my heart was silent. It was as if it had known all along. In the morning, I placed the photo on his desk, not hidden, not torn, just waiting. When he saw it, he froze. No shouting, no denial, just silence. Then he whispered, "She was the woman I should have married. Anne, have you ever heard your soul crack? It doesn't sound like glass breaking or a door slamming shut. It's quieter, like a sigh that never ends." I didn't ask him to explain. I simply nodded, picked up my coat, and walked into the garden. The roses were in bloom that day, red, full, and alive. And I remember thinking how strange it was that something so beautiful could grow beside something so broken. Anne's eyes glisten, but she says nothing. She knows that kind of pain. We both do. "You stayed with him?" she asks finally. "Yes," I whisper. Because sometimes love isn't about staying happy. It's about staying until you're strong enough to leave. Elderly British woman voice, soft emotional tone, reflective storytelling, slow cinematic narration, quiet heartbreak, nostalgic confession, bittersweet closure, tender realism, gentle pauses, warmth and regret. Anne stirred her tea slowly, the silver spoon chiming against the porcelain. The room was quiet, except for the rain tapping softly against the window. I could tell she wanted to ask, "Why didn't you leave sooner?" But she didn't. Old friends don't always need words. I looked into the fire, the way one looks into the past, and then I began to tell her about that night. It was winter, the kind of cold that seeps through the walls, into your bones, into the spaces where warmth used to live. Edward had gone to his study again, his door closed as always. I knew what he was doing, or who he was writing to. I walked to the door and knocked once. He didn't answer. I opened it gently, just enough to see him sitting there, his shoulders slumped, pen in hand, tears on his face. He looked up, startled, as if I'd caught him stealing air. For a moment we both just stared. Then he whispered, "I never meant to hurt you." I wanted to shout, to ask why, to demand how long, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I said something I never planned to say. "I know, Edward. You just never meant to love me, either." His eyes closed, and in that silence I felt the final thread between us break. Soft, invisible, but real. That night I didn't sleep. I went into the garden and sat on the bench Thomas built years ago, back when we first bought the house. The moonlight touched the roses, turning them silver. I thought about all the years I had given him, the dinners, the waiting, the forgiveness. And then I thought about myself, the woman who used to laugh, who used to dream, who used to believe love was enough. Where had she gone? When morning came, I packed a small bag. Just the essentials, a few clothes,
a photograph of my children, and my wedding ring, which I placed on his pillow. He didn't wake up as I left. I don't think he even heard the door close. That was the day I learned something I wish every woman knew. You can't make someone love you by loving them harder. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for both of you is to walk away quietly. Anne reached out and took my hand. Her touch was warm, steady, and in her eyes I saw my own reflection, older, wiser, softer. I don't regret loving him, I said finally. I just regret forgetting myself along the way. The fire crackled. Outside, the rain had stopped, and in that stillness I felt something lift from my chest. Not joy, not sorrow, but peace. We sat together for a long time, two old women, two healers of broken hearts, sharing the silence of understanding. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone.
It's been 22 years since that morning. Sometimes I still wake up thinking I hear his footsteps in the hall, that familiar rhythm that once filled our home. But it's only the wind now, brushing against the old windows of my cottage by the sea. I built a quiet life after Edward, moved to this little coastal village where the days pass like soft waves, never rushing, never stopping. I tend to my garden, feed the stray cat that visits every afternoon, and watch the sunsets alone, wrapped in a blanket of peace I never knew back then. People often ask if I ever loved again, and I'd tell them the truth. I never stopped loving, but I chose to love differently, not through sacrifice or silence, but through kindness, for myself and for those who truly stayed. You see, heartbreak doesn't destroy us, it reshapes us. It teaches us how to live without needing to be chosen to feel worthy. There was a time I believed love meant staying, no matter how much it hurt, but now I know love can also mean leaving, with grace, with dignity, with your heart still soft. Anne still visits, every Sunday. We sit by the same window, two old souls watching the world drift by, sharing stories that once broke us, and now heal us. Sometimes she teases me gently. "You should have written a book, Margaret." And I smile. Oh no, my stories belong to the wind now. But deep down I know, these memories, these confessions, they were never just about sorrow. They were lessons, whispered through years of quiet endurance. And maybe that's what life is, a collection of unfinished stories, stitched together with moments of love and loss. One evening, as the sun melted into the sea, I walked down to the shore. The air was cool, the horizon painted in gold. I held an old letter in my hand, one Edward had written me years before, full of apologies and the kind of regret that comes too late. I read it one last time, then folded it gently and let the waves take it. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in release, because after all this time, I realized something simple, something true. Forgiveness isn't about saying it didn't hurt. It's about saying it no longer controls me. I turned back toward the cottage, the evening light soft on the water, and as I walked, I felt lighter, not because I forgot, but because I remembered, without pain. Maybe that's what healing really is, not erasing the past, but learning to live gently beside it. Anne always says my stories sound like confessions. Perhaps they are, but to me they're just truths, spoken out loud so they no longer echo inside. And tonight, as the sky turned to twilight, I whispered one last truth to the wind. I loved, I lost,
and I lived.